So far on this channel, we have looked at a number of guides to help players with various aspects of Digimon World Next Order. Today's video is a little different, and I thought that we could have more of a discussion and theorise about some of the DLC-esque features that I think would be cool to see in the game. I am pretty pleased with the way that Next Order has turned out, and I don't actually think that it needs a lot of DLC to make it successful. I've already had a bunch of fun playing the game, so this video is definitely not bashing on Next Order. It's just going to toss around a few what-if kind of scenarios that could be quite fun to speculate on. Now, straight off the bat, I don't want to get anybody mixed up here. The stuff I'm going to be speculating about are just some ideas that I think would be kind of interesting if they were added into the game. Secondly, most of these ideas are extremely stupid and unrealistic. I know that a lot of the points discussed are going to be wild and exuberant, and I don't expect much, if any, to ever be added into the actual game. This list again is just made up of fun ideas that I think would be cool. With this in mind then, you guys be sure to fire me some of your thoughts down in the comments below. Is there anything that you wish had been included in Next Order? Maybe something you'd like to see in future Digimon games that the developers missed this time around? Make sure you share with us below. Lastly, I made a Twitter. I kind of forgot to tell you guys about it, so right now it has 1 follower and I'm pretty sure it's my gran. If you want to stay updated on future videos or ideas, or you want to message me directly, I have a link to the channel Twitter account on screen now and in the description below. Make sure you come along and shout some abuse at me. Anyways, let's get into the video. Okay, so starting off our list then, it's pretty generic, but I would expect that if they were to add any sort of new content to this game, as they have done in the past in the January DLC, they would add a bunch of new Digimon and or a couple of extra Digi-Eggs. The developers have already done a pretty insane job of keeping the amount of variety in this game high. This being said, there is a couple of familiar Digimon that we haven't yet seen introduced into this game, and so there is room, if they really wanted to, add in some extras. Again, I am already quite pleased with the amount of Digimon that exist in this game, but if we're speaking from a completely speculative point of view, then adding in new characters is just going to add on to that feeling of uniqueness every time you play through the game. It's going to add replayability. It means that when you discuss the game with your friends, the chances of you sharing an identical playing session to them is going to be reduced even more. In terms of extending the life cycle of the game then, this is the first feature I would like to see added as part of my DLC. Next up then, I think it would be kinda cool if they added new map locations or zones to the pre-existing world. If we look at some of the explorable areas that we have in Next Order, it's quite clear that the developers paid a lot of homage to the original Digimon world. As a quick example, Faulty Ex Machina is extremely reminiscent of Factorial Town, in the sense that it's a zone completely governed by machine-type Digimon. Similarly, Absolute Zero and the Snow Cathedral seem very familiar to Friesland and the Ice Palace. I guess my point is that there are a bunch of other memorable biomes from the original game that could also make a nostalgic appearance as extra content in this game. Obviously, we don't want to just straight up copy the first Digimon world, as at the end of the day, they are 2 separate games. That being said, there is a lot of material here that could be revisited or reimagined in Next Order. In a lot of areas, there are already segments or pathways which currently lead to dead ends, but you could definitely see these acting as a suitable doorway to new areas. As an example, I could totally see a path from the back of Logic Volcano leading into the Warped Dino region, where time progresses slowly or quickly depending on where you are. I could imagine that one of the pathways leading out of Faulty Ex Machina could lead into a misty forest where you might or might not stumble across Toy Town. Again, there really is a good set of zones already in Next Order. These are just some extra locations that I think could be sick if slotted in via DLC. In addition to new parts of the map then, why not also have new parts to the city as well? What if we added in a bigger entrance area where Digimon's house is, in order to make room for some new buildings? What about if we reshuffled some of the shops in the market district and added in a square with stalls? What about if we added in a dock to the agricultural side of the city and maybe have some sort of sea Digimon set up a boat transportation system? But Jack, Felicia is flying in the sky, how can we have a dock? Well, if we can have a goddamn waterfall, we can get a pier, right? And make sure you stick Waymon in there too. I miss that guy. What about if we added an underground set of tunnels to the city, like the sewer system similar to Oblivion? What about adding the Digimon card shop, where you could buy and sell packs of Digimon cards? One idea I had was, what if we added some sort of watchtower to a district, and that could act as some sort of wave/defense minigame where you could battle evil Digimon attacking the city. The longer you hold them off and defend the city, the more you're then rewarded by the residents, that sort of thing. These are just a bunch of stupid ideas, I know, but one aspect I love about the game is seeing the city grow and expand as you progress through the narrative. It really gives a nice feel and indication of your progress, and I think it would be cool to see this theme continued through extra content. At our number 4 spot, my next idea for new content would be a new narrative or storyline. I know I keep harping on about the original Digimon World, and for this I do apologise, especially for you guys who have never played it before or for who Next Order is your introduction to the series. But what if a new story element was added to Next Order that allowed you to travel to the abandoned File City, which was the location of the first Digimon World? In the past, other video games have played the nostalgia card by taking players back to some historical locations from their original titles when played later on in their sequels. Some examples of this would be finding Grove Street from San Andreas when you were exploring in GTA 5. Another would be in Metal Gear Solid 4, which took you back to Shadow Moses, where the plot of the first game took place. In my imagination, it would be cool to see the original File City run down and covered in overgrown foliage. You could walk around some of the old parts of the city and see how time had took its toll on the place. Maybe you could even have an interaction with Mamio, who, as the main protagonist from DW1, he would recognise the place. Maybe you could find an old and tired Digimon still living in his home, the last survivor of what was once a great town. Anyways, a new storyline wouldn't have to revolve around this, but this would be my on the spot pitch if the developers asked me. Let me know what you guys think. At our number 5 spot, we have new boss fights and recruitable Digimon. Early on, we discussed having new locations and parts to the city, so in order to fill these, it only makes sense that we have more Digimon to go there, right? Where is Pixelmon, where is Andromon, Shellmon, Dromogimon? All these guys could be added as extra side quests and with them bring their own missions. A lot of reviews on Next Order tend to pick up on the fact that a lot of recruitable Digimon are accompanied by one of two tasks. Either you have to battle them or you have to fetch something for them. To compensate for this, why not have more bosses that have RNG based spawns? In the same sense that the King Digimon only appear in their respective areas a fraction of the time, why not have some recruitable Digimon that do the same? This would make it more interesting when you do eventually run into them, and it might add an extra challenge for players specifically trying to find them. Speaking of King Digimon, what about having city residents who sold you hunter contracts for fighting these guys? You could tick them off as you beat them and have a drive for purposely seeking them out. Another idea would be having time-based Digimon recruitments. Although I expect a lot of players found the Piedmon hide and seek challenge rather tedious, I actually quite enjoyed it myself, and I had a higher sense of accomplishment than normal when I finally completed it. What about if there was more quests that put players on the clock in order to add that different type of challenge? There's probably a lot more creative aspects that you could think up given more time. These are just a couple that crossed my mind thus far. Okay, so number 6, new movesets. Next Order has done a pretty decent job covering a lot of the different elements that could potentially be included as attack skills, so I won't dwell on this one for too long. I mean, come on, they even added a column of poop attacks. Along the same vein then, my ideas for this expansion are pretty shit, so don't get too excited. Some extra columns could be dragon type moves, zombie type moves, feral or beast type abilities, maybe some illusional or mystic types. Again, I know these are terrible guys, but it's quite difficult to add to the types already embedded in the game. My answer to this would be that instead of adding extra types of attacks, perhaps extra rows could be added to the table of moves instead. This would maintain the idea from earlier where we were trying to expand the variety of the game. Similarly, by increasing the number of attacks, the developers give the player more choice, and in doing so, make the game a little more diverse on each run through. New movesets was quite a tough one to cover, but here are some of my thoughts anyway. I don't know where I got zombie moves from, let's just pretend that never happened. Our next idea up is new upgraded visuals for some of the buildings in town. Again, this is quite similar to earlier on when we discussed adding new parts to the city as DLC. The difference in this instance would be to maintain and upgrade rather than install completely new areas or buildings. I don't know about you, but I thought that when I upgraded Birdramon, aka the Sender, when in the builder menu, that Birdramon's perch sitting just outside would change in some way. Digimon's house and other buildings have visual differences when upgraded. If I could add in some DLC here, I would make it so that some of these changes are more definitive, or in the case of Birdramon, actually happen in the first place. Some other examples would be perhaps to upgrade and choose a detail for the city walls. Maybe add in some extra background buildings or houses. I mean, where do all these residents go to sleep? What about adding in some sort of weather functionality to the city, so that sometimes it's raining, sometimes it's snowing, maybe thunder and lightning, just whatever. As you spend a lot of your time in Floatia, any sort of content that could make it a bit more lively or add a bit more life to the city would be welcome in my opinion. Moving swiftly onwards, our number 8 spot is the discussion of new items. Things are about to get very Pokemon-ish, guys, so you might want to buckle up. It is questionable, but for someone who is supposedly trying to save the digital world, the main character who you play as runs about as fast as a snail on tranquilizers going uphill. Why not add in running shoes that allow you to sprint for a short distance while out and about on your Digi adventures? Why not add in a bike so that you don't have to pack 18 meals for the journey between the bottom and top of Boning Resort? On a more serious note though, obviously you could also add in a bunch of new ingredients for cooking, maybe a bunch of new fish for catching, maybe you could add in some sort of armor stones that might allow you to digivolve into some of these unique Digimon. What about some sort of special item that could be passively held by your Digimon that would trigger automatically in battle? Again, all bad examples I know, but these are just a few that I came up with earlier on. There are probably a number of other cooler items that you could probably add into the game. At number 9, we have a DLC pack for some sort of upgraded audio overhaul. I think the developers did well with the music in Next Order. They pretty much nailed some of the classic soundtracks, and some of the new stuff is actually quite catchy as well. Arguably though, some of the audio effects and voice acting are not quite as up to par. I don't think that any of it is super bad, and there's not much that really has to change. I would maybe just tweak some of the Digimon war cries so that they're not quite as horrific and don't scar me for life when I hear them. One thing that I would definitely focus on would be to add a wider variety of alternative dialogues for repetitive events. For instance, maybe when I bust my ass recruiting Mega Digimon to join the city, Digimon won't tell me over and over that I have made his day. Similarly, when my Digimon pass away, it would be nice to hear something other than being told to hold them in my heart and hope for the best. I mean, what does this even mean? Do you think Digimon is always high? Anyways, the developers would never add DLC that replaces all audio of the game. That would be pretty hilarious. If anything, this would likely come in the form of a patch or some sort of mod by the community. I get that. But as this is unlikely to ever happen, I've added it to my list of imaginary downloadable content. It would be pretty interesting to hear, to say the least. In at our last and final spot, some of the last few things I would like to see added as additional content to the game come in the form of new features. Really, these are more to do with the structure and functionality of the game, rather than the additions to the gameplay itself. In my opinion, it would be nice to be able to pan the camera out a little bit more, so that you could see a little better. This would be especially prevalent when you have huge Digimon that take up the majority of the screen. Acquiring any Digimon with wings is basically the equivalent to drinking a few beers. You can still see where you're going, you just don't have 100% vision. Also, I think it would be cool if you would be able to see your Digivolution chart as a whole, so that when you have your baby Digimon, you can look all the way to the end in order to plan your route to a specific Mega. Speaking of babies, why not have a counter in the egg respawn screen, which tells you how many times you've picked a particular egg? As someone who wanted to get rid of Gobblemon for 3 days, I ended up forgetting which one was his egg and picked up the same goddamn one twice in a row. Having a counter would let you choose some of the eggs you've only had a handful of times and maybe experience some Digimon that you've not had before. Along a completely different school of thought though, I know for a fact that there is a pretty awesome community of speedrunners involved in the Digimon World games. Why not have a function in the options menu that adds a stopwatch to the game that players could turn on and off if they wanted? Similarly, it would be nice to be able to load a save slot from within the game itself rather than have to reset the game via the PS button. Lastly, the online features that have been added to Next Order are a nice touch, but it would be cool to see some of these developed a bit further. Again, not to bark up the Pokemon tree too much, but what if you were able to trade some Digimon with your friends through the online network? Obviously, there would need to be some sort of restrictions in place to make sure that people weren't trading their friends OP Digimon at the beginning of the game and stuff like that, but I'm sure they could do it if they wanted. There's probably room for a number of far more important features that I'm missing here, so be sure to let me know what you guys think. And that, ladies and gentlemen, you'll be pleased to know about rounds us up. I know a lot of these ideas are ridiculous and in many cases quite dumb, but I had a lot of fun making this video, so if any of you guys enjoyed it, then I am super pleased. On screen now, you guys can find some of the links to my last couple of Next Order guides, which you might enjoy if you haven't already had the misfortune of watching. Again, you'll find a link to the new Twitter down below if you fancy being the first few legends in the Mr. Wolfie dynasty. Thank you guys so much for watching. You have no idea how much your support really means to me, and I appreciate each and every one of you guys who takes the time to rate and comment on these videos. Anyways, I have been Mr. Wolfie, aka Jack, aka whatever you and your second favourite pet want to call me. Have a fantastic day guys, and I will see you next time.